Soon he began writing his own works for the stage, and in 1764 The Shepherd's Artifice was performed, the first of many comic operas he wrote, of which The Waterman, from which the song The Jolly Young Waterman was taken, was one of the most successful. The Waterman was written in 1774 and first performed at the Haymarket Theatre, within easy hopping distance of the Notre Dame London Global Gateway. Dibdin's comic operas, or afterpieces, were light, enjoyable entertainments that followed after the main play. In one of these, The Padlock, for which Dibdin wrote the music to words by Isaac Bickerstaff, Dibdin acted the role of Mungo, a West Indian servant, in a comic part that saw Dibdin wearing blackface. Dibdin was thus the first actor to play a comic blackface role on the English stage, the enormous success of which, somewhat problematically, prepared the way for other forms of comic, racialized performance such as the minstrel shows, which were imported from America some decades later. In 1769, Dibdin wrote the music for David Garrick's Jubilee, a celebration of all things Shakespeare, held in Stratford-upon-Avon, and often considered one of the events that institutionalised the idea of Shakespeare as the bard, the greatest English poet who ever lived, and a national icon. The thing about Dibdin, though, is that he was a cantankerous sort, and he had a really hard time getting along with people for any great length of time. He had fallings out with nearly everyone he worked with, including the managers of the major theatres such as David Garrick, and after a while he left the pattern theatres of Covent Garden and Drury Lane, entering into a partnership to establish the Royal Circus, which combined singing, dancing, horse riding and various feats of entertainment, and which provided the English language with the word circus, meaning not just a circular stage which the Royal Circus possessed, but a hybrid form of popular entertainment. These entertainments included dancing, taught by Giuseppe Grimaldi, a well-known harlequin, and father to Joe Grimaldi, probably the most famous clown who ever lived. Soon, though, the Royal Circus collapsed due to financial mismanagement, and Dibdin spent the rest of his career working on solo projects, including writing 3 novels, publishing musical instruction manuals, a large history of the theatre, and a full-volume autobiography. He also went on 2 tours of England with a show to raise money. And these are notable because he took with him a modified pianoforte, and Dibdin is sometimes credited as being the first person to perform on the piano in public in England. The tours are also notable because their success inspired Dibdin to open his own theatre in London, to perform what he described as table entertainments. And between 1788 and 1809, Dibdin performed in a series of shows featuring just himself, assuming various personas, telling anecdotes and singing songs of his own creation. These were crucial to the development of the one-man show as a form, but more importantly, they provided an outlet for Dibdin's songwriting talents, and he composed hundreds of songs, many of which sold as broadside ballads on the streets of cities throughout Great Britain, and remained extremely popular throughout the Victorian period. The most famous of these is probably Tom Bowling, which is still occasionally performed at the BBC Last Night at the Proms. It tells the story of a sailor who has died and is mourned by his fellow sailors. It is typical of the kinds of song for which Dibdin is best known, songs that celebrated England's naval power by focusing on individual sailors who were strong and resilient, but also sentimental and weren't afraid to shed a manly tear at moments of finely orchestrated pathos. Despite featuring boats, The Jolly Young Waterman is not one of these songs that celebrates the Navy. It comes from a much earlier period in Dibdin's career and is not celebrating someone engaged in the national projects of the Navy, but a waterman, working on the Thames, ferrying people to the pleasure gardens of Vauxhall and Ranelagh, about which you can read more on the London and Song website.